This is a really, really exciting panel. I think we can say that about every panel. I'm delighted to introduce our fellows for the year 2005, 2025 to 2026 for the Weisfeld Maayan Institute. We are blessed, as we were blessed last year, to have wonderful fellows from a range of backgrounds and fields, and everybody's going to share a little bit about what they do, and they're going to talk about they're going to share some reflections on what it's been like to be a Maayan fellow for the past year. We'll see how much the war features in that or doesn't feature in that. One of the fellows, Yehudah Sinclair, who is a doctoral student, cannot be with us today, but our other fellows are here. We have 2 doctoral students, 2 postdocs, 2 senior fellows, and now I'm just going to briefly introduce Professor Yehudah Mirsky, who has I'm not sure how much I need to say as introduction, but Professor Mirsky has come from Brandeis to spend a year with us and has done some incredible work and facilitation and ongoing support and scholarly nurturing of our fellows, and we're deeply grateful. And Yehudah is going to be facilitating this conversation.
Terrific. Okay, well, thank you, and I hope you can you hear us all? Or can you, okay, terrific. Yeah, so wonderful to be here, and tremendous thanks to Miriam and to Chanoch for this whole thing. And the absence of ego with which Chanoch and Miriam conduct themselves is manifest in everything that they've been doing with this institute, and in frankly, the extent and the depth of the responsibility they've been taking for this conference, down to the nitty-gritty of, the coffee and the taxi cabs and everything. I've known them for a long time and greatly respected them. We're not here to listen about me, but just I'd like to think that one of the things in which I participated in helping bring about Machon Maayan was a few years ago. Chanoch and I had been in conversation for a long time. There was a World Congress of Jewish Studies coming up, and we were chatting, and we said, well, instead of doing our usual thing, get together, Levinas this and Rav Kook that, let's do a day on things like climate change and sustainability and all that sort of thing, and we did, and it's just like a helpful tip. You sort of piggyback on an existing Congress to do a mini conference of your own. But what was really meaningful to me that day was the last session that we had. It was, do you remember, Chanoch? It was you and I, Annabelle. and Annabelle and Professor Annabelle Herzog. And the question we put squarely on the table there was, okay, we've had a wonderful day of conversation. Do we have anything to say? And since then, just a thought that's been accompanying us is that, well, we think the Jewish philosophy is this tremendously interesting thing. So of course we must have what to say about the big issues of the day, but maybe we don't. Or if we persist in it, what are the things we can say that are actually in meaningful conversation with conversations that people are having? What are meaningful interventions that we can make in ongoing conversations, and also that these conversations elsewhere can make in us? So that was sort of my little thing, and then I was pretty done. And then I showed up this year, and after our first meeting, I was just in awe of the group of people that Chanoch and Miriam had put together. And so it's just such a pleasure to be here with all of them. with all of you. It's with all due respect to our wonderful colleagues in the academy. You know, how often do you get to be in a seminar with people who you really respect, from whom you learn all the time, and who just talk about real things? Like the sheer absence, at least I found, the sheer absence of jargon in our conversations. I mean, people bring their professional vocabularies and all that, and that's great, that's terrific. But it's just such a pleasure. And so I have the genuine pleasure and honor of presenting to you my really remarkable colleagues from this year. And part of what the point here, it's not just, you know, to line us all up and people are going to do their stuff. So much of thinking about this work of sustainability is also, it invites, forces, summons us to rethink what is the work of scholarship and what is the meaning of collaboration, right? So if what does it mean to think about things collectively and as a group, while respecting the integrity of people's disciplines, while respecting while respecting what we know and what we don't know, in almost classic Judaic terms, it's how do you create some of the ideals animating the Beit Midrash. The house of study is a place where people actually study and learn together in different ways, in different styles, in different modes of learning, and different approaches, centered on something towards something that exists outside the Beit Midrash, outside the house of study. And so who are we sitting with here today? First, I'd like to mention who Miriam mentioned, who isn't here, Rabbi Yehudah Sinclair, who can't be with us owing to the recent passing of his father, and he's has to take care of all kinds of things. I asked him to share well, first I'll just tell you who he is, okay? Rabbi Yehudah Sinclair, who's with us in spirit, serves as Director of Research at the Jewish Climate Trust, with a background in clean energy entrepreneurship as well as Jewish education. He previously served as Vice President of Energia Global, right, a solar energy firm working in developing countries, and as rabbi to the students at Cambridge University, where he also taught Jewish studies in the Divinity School. He has a BA from Oxford University, a master's from Harvard, pursued PhD studies in Jewish thought at University College London, and is currently a doctoral candidate in the Department of Jewish Thought at Bar-Ilan University. And as my colleagues share their work, I'll also share with you what Yehudah is working on this year. But now I just proceed. Dr. Jeremy Benste is one of the founders and part of the senior staff at the Heschel Center for Sustainability in Tel Aviv. He holds his BA from Harvard, a master's in rabbinic literature, and a PhD in environmental anthropology. He teaches environmental ethics at Tel Aviv University, is the author of The Way into Judaism and the Environment, published in 2006, and many other publications in English and Hebrew on the intersection of the sources of Judaism and the challenges of sustainability today. I first encountered Jeremy's name 20-something years ago when there was once this magazine called Jerusalem Report, and this guy, Jeremy Benste, who I'd never heard of, wrote something that I thought was like one of the most interesting things I'd ever seen on Judaism and environmentalism, and I thought I have to meet this person, etc. And luckily I did. And then some years
later it happened.
And then, but also along the way, I used his book as my textbook for my course in Jewish environmental ethics. So for teaching undergrads, that book is like catnip, in a good way. Dr. B. Baharier. B is a planetary geochemist and astrobiologist working at the intersection of planetary science, sustainability, and ethics. Can I mention your service in Tzahal, what you did?
If you want.
So among other, though it's not here, among other things, she was in the research arm of the K9 unit of Tzahal. Who knew? She's like a remarkably accomplished individual. She's also the only person I know who's actually danced her dissertation, in addition to. But she holds but that's just, froth upon the seas. She holds a master's in geochemistry from the University of St. Andrews and a PhD in planetary science and astrobiology from the Open University of the UK. And she's deeply involved in research for figuring out how do we figure out, for instance, if I've understood correctly, how do we figure out how to figure out whether and if and where there's water on Mars? If I understood something.
Well,
A little, right. And currently she's a postdoctoral fellow here at Maayan, and her research draws on Jewish philosophical thought to examine humanity's relationship with planetary environments and the ethical implications of space exploration. Dr. Avner Dinur is a secular theologian. He lectures in Jewish studies at Sapir College and Bar-Ilan University. His book, Something to Believe in, Secular Theology, appeared with Idra Publishing, great publishing house that Conant was very involved with, in 2023. He's also the co-chair of FAB, Friendship Across Borders, which is a joint German-Israeli-Palestinian initiative. Dr. Shira Vardi, I'm going alphabetically, you see. Dr. Shira Vardi teaches at the Max Stern Yisrael Valley College in northern Israel. She's a lecturer and she's a member of the faculties of human service and of social work. And she's had a varied professional and academic path, but nowadays she's working on two distinctively Judaic, and in one case Judaic Israel, social practices and configurations, the kibbutz and the eruv. And looking at them in terms of, what does this have to do with sustainability? Public space, the privatization of public space, inclusion, exclusion, property, community, right? How do the lines drawn for Shabbat overlap with or not the lines that a kibbutz draws internally and externally? And she lives in kibbutz Nir David, where we had the pleasure of meeting a few weeks ago, married to Tzafrir and mother to 6 children. And Rachel Verliebter. Rachel Verliebter is a psychotherapist, doctoral student at the Department of Justice. She's also, like me, a refugee, a fugitive from the law, a non-practicing lawyer. Psychotherapist and a doctoral student at the Department of Jewish Philosophy here at Bar-Ilan, and she's completing her dissertation dedicated to investigating the symbolism and phenomenology of water in Jewish mysticism. Of course, once you think about it, it's everywhere. In her wider interdisciplinary research, Rachel explores medieval and modern Jewish intellectual history and centers on the role of the Kabbalah in modern identity, in the discourse of modern identity, and with particular interest on the Parisian school of Jewish thought, right? L'école de pensée juive de Paris. And she's also an artist. And actually, as we speak, her work is currently on exhibit at the Shokin Institute in Jerusalem, in conjunction with an international conference that they are holding on the feminine and the sacred. So you see, there's just this I mean, the point makes itself. It's a stunning richness of sitting here with you. And now my colleagues, one by one, what we're going to do is like do one round where people briefly describe what they've been working on at Maayan this year, and then another round where we talk about what the experience of working together as a group has taught us, developed in us, changed for us, what insights, what insights have we come to, what sorts of things might have surprised us. And so why don't we just start, and we'll just go this way, Jeremy.
Okay. Thank you, Yehudah, for all that. I'll just say that since you're the one with the watch, you'll make sure that we all stick to time, starting with myself. What I am researching this year and trying to develop materials on, I'll give the slightly jocular title of Jews and Money. And by explaining how I got there, I'll give a little bit more about what I mean. as was mentioned, I've been involved in the environmental movement for many years, and also in parallel involved in this discussion of Judaism in nature, Judaism in the environment. For many of you who are familiar with that field, that has certain parameters about which sources and what ideas and what values and what practices. And as part of that, also being exposed to the larger discourse of religion and the environment, of which there's a lot going on in various levels and institutions and faith traditions. And over the years, feeling like that whole discourse has not really succeeded in moving the needle very much. There is a phrase in Hebrew, "Haklavim novchim v'hashayera uveret," right? The dogs will bark away, but the convoy will continue on its path. In thinking more deeply about why certain things happen, why we've gotten to the stage we have in the loss of biodiversity and climate change and everything else, I, along with many others, have come to the conclusion that the economy plays no small role in that, and economic incentives and economic considerations in terms of personal behavior choices as well as public policy decisions. And so taking that back to my original interest of, okay, what does Judaism have to say about all these issues, where before I was thinking more specifically about our place in nature and metaphysical and spiritual questions, I realized, well, what does Judaism have to say about these economic questions? And when I say Judaism, I'll just say we use that term a lot, but of course I'm referring to the very multivocal and pluralistic collection of traditions and texts and sources and people and schools and time periods and everything else. So there's a lot there. It's not one monolithic thing, of course. So I said, well, are there Jewishly informed positions about capitalism, about socialism? What can we say about what does Jewish tradition have to bring to the table if we're talking about the problems of unchecked growth in terms of macroeconomy or the growing social and economic gap? And I'll just say about that gap that while there have always been rich and poor, and certainly wealth and poverty is an issue as old as the Bible and before, the time period that we're in, I'm not sure everybody is always so aware of this, when we're minting our trillionaires, that it's not just a question of some people have a little bit more and some people have a little bit less, or about how much money, but the people who control wealth in our societies not only can shape those societies to a much greater degree than ever before, but also can shape our political world to a much greater degree than ever before. And that then becomes a question far beyond economics into politics and culture and everything else. And so trying to bring Jewish sources to bear on that. And the second reason why I started thinking about this is that with the rise of a certain form of right-wing politics in this country, where right-wing politics has become associated with right-wing economic approaches, and those two are not the same thing. If I had more time, I would go into that. But and those two being associated specifically in this country with a stronger Jewish identity or stronger connection to Jewish tradition. And so this kind of alignment, this belief that Jewish tradition is somehow more on the side of neoliberal capitalism than other things, hopefully to the dismay of all those religious kibbutzniks who are living a socialist lifestyle, I began to say, well, wait a minute, is that true? I mean, what are the sources in Judaism that support that approach? And many of the sources that I was familiar with are actually somewhat critical of that approach, that talk about limits on the market, that talk about the injection of values. If lo tachmod, do not covet, is one of the Big Ten, right? The Ten Commandments, and yet we have essentially an economy based on, as Rabbi Yuval Sherlow calls it, hachmada, right? The business of advertising and marketing as something that is designed to arouse covetous feelings, etc. That I thought there's a very rich discussion to be had here that I wasn't seeing was happening in too many places, and so that's the direction that I would like to put together.
Thank you. Avner.
Okay. First of all, many thanks for the center, for Maayan Center, for Hanoch and Miriam, and also for this group, for the very enriching experience of this year that we've been doing together. It's not ended yet. It's still ongoing. As Yehudah was saying earlier, I'm a secular theologian. I do secular theology, and probably some of you would like to know what that means. And I can say very briefly that here in Maayan Center, I'm trying to ask the question, how is theology important for questions of sustainability and for ethics, which is the theme of the center in general. But I'm doing it mainly through the works of Hans Jonas and Emmanuel Levinas. Both I see as secular theologians, and I follow the footsteps. And I can also say very briefly to explain what I mean by that. I want to mention something that happened only a few days ago. A few days ago, the Pope published a letter called Magnifica Humanitas, which is about the challenges of technology and the challenges of AI in specific for our time. And the letter is really, really interesting and important, I think, important. And except for the opening line of the letter, which I didn't find very convincing, the rest of the letter is really, really wonderful. And the opening line says that humanity was created by God. I didn't find that very, very convincing. But the rest is really great. But I thought even more important that on the same occasion, the co-founder of Anthropic, the company that runs Claude, that probably all of you know, was invited to share his thoughts about what the Pope was saying. And he said something very interesting. He said that we in the industry, actually it's not we, it's they, in the industry, they need religion. They need religion, they need philosophy to keep the limits, to say what AI should do and what AI should not do. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And I thought it was interesting because what this guy, Chris Ola, was saying is that actually we need to differentiate between what science is doing. Science is tasked to say what this world is, how it functions, how should we understand the world, and it's all about the how. It's not about the what. It's not about what are our obligations, what is the ethics of our world, it's not the what, it's the how. And I thought that he is absolutely right, and I think in order to deal with the great challenges that technology is bringing to our world, we need something outside of the ontological server that science can bring, to bring something else. And I think this is what theology is doing. But in order for theology to do this, it has to be very clear about what is the role of theology. And the role of theology is to give us a picture of the world, or is the role of theology bringing us an idea about what is our task in the world, what should we do in the world. And I believe that religious theology in general, especially if it believes that humans were created by God, as the Pope was saying, is really failing this task. And the question is how theology could take the task, the great challenges of our time seriously. And I think only secular theology can do that. How? That's a,
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you all for coming and for Hanoch and Miriam and for the group. So I decided to kind of talk how I got here. So I started off as how presented earlier, the super vegan. I used to be a super vegan, blockading big bulldozers coming to destroy the Amazon rainforest and indigenous people. And I was very, very passionate about all that. And then one day I went to a gathering of indigenous people, and the chief said there to his community, the first time the white man came, he came with guns and we came with bows and arrows. This time we need to come with the same weapon, education. Send our children out of our villages and give them education. Send them to be lawyers, send them to be scientists, send them to be doctors. So when they come to us and try to tell us what's happening with our river, what's happening with our water, what's happening with our village, we have the same weapon. We actually know what's happening. We don't need you to tell us. And that was my wake-up call to stop being an activist and going to study, to learn. And I wanted to save the planet, so I went to do geology, studied geology to say, okay, I care about this planet, I want to understand deep time. I want to know what's happening and how to save it. And my questions just got bigger and bigger of what is actually life and what is humans and life connection to our planet. And then it got bigger, thinking, okay, if life has a connection to our planet, does it have a connection to all planets, to all moons, to all the universe? And I did my master's and my PhD in the connection between life and the rock. And basically looking at this connection. I understand that microbes eat rock and microbes live off rock, and microbes change planets. They changed our planet. They changed they potentially have changed Mars as well, potentially have changed the moon if they have ever been there. And these questions just grew and grew and grew. And during my PhD, that we had COVID, and I understand, okay, these microbes are actually affecting all of us, and we're not protected from them. And when more and more, private companies and different countries are going out of our planet, going to Mars, going to the moon, and potentially there's life that we don't know yet. We don't have any evidence for if there is or isn't life. But what happens if one of these private companies or countries get a microbe on their ship and bring them back to our planet? Are we protected from that potential life that can do something to us? We know what happened during COVID, but what if it's a life form that we don't know anything about? What if it destroys our rainforests? What if it destroys everything on our planet? And we have this cross-contamination, because also when we go to another planet or when we go to another moon, we can bring our microbiome into that ecosystem. And then these bigger questions are arising: does it even matter that we destroy an ecosystem in another planet? Is this other planet, if it's just microbes that live in a rock and just eat rock, what does it matter if we give them our diseases, our biome? And what does it matter if we destroy them? And I guess these questions just got bigger, and idea of, okay, they're indigenous to their planet, we're indigenous to our planet. And these questions kind of went back into me and saying, okay, what is my indigeneity? How am I indigenous? What is my connection? And I guess going back to where I came from initially, before the super vegan, growing up in Israel, being Jewish, really thinking about what does my ethical ideas about connection to a land, connection to the planet, connection to this world, and thinking about Adam as the first person that comes from Adama, and is our Adama, Earth, the only important Adama? Or is the Adama on Mars, which I studied for many, many years, also important to us as our Adama as well? And asking what is our responsibility as humans to the Adama that's not only here, but to the Adama that's on every planet, terrestrial planet and moon. And that's me.
Okay.
also start with how I got to my subject. My interest in the mythology of water cross-culturally actually reaches back to my days studying comparative literature. I was intrigued by the Ophelia complex, Hamlet's Ophelia, specifically how the Western literature, Western art, construed dreams, reveries, or nightmares of the feminine, where women in water are almost always inextricably tied to death. Ophelia dissolves into her tears by sadness about the split subject, Hamlet, as we see in the myth of mermaids, Undine, Melusine. And over time, this early interest evolved into my current research in the fields of medieval and modern intellectual Jewish history. I began looking at narratives of the Shekhinah, specifically examining how Kabbalah construed the gendered ontology of matter, matter, the sea. In French, it's a homophone, mère, mother, the sea, she's the same. In studying these texts, I was consistently drawn, and when I say texts, I mean early Midrash, Merkava literature, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Hazor, and I saw that there was a consistent thread of a mysticism of light and a mysticism of water when describing the encounter with the divine. The divine, when it's met, the elements, nature comes into the picture. And I began to see that water in these texts wasn't merely a poetic metaphor, but a profound gendered ontological category tied deeply to the feminine, to the primordial womb, and to the Shekhinah, to the experience of the Shekhinah herself. So recognizing how deeply the feminine archetype and the liquid element were intertwined, and how this feminine matter, was often subjugated, I call it subjugated matter, in the texts, much like the tragic figures of Western literature. So this became the foundation, the inspiration of my current work. It became essential for me to trace the trauma of the weeping waters, Mein Bochim, and explore how this subjugated matter eventually finds its tikkun, their good news, and healing. Because it's different. I found it's different than in the West. It's in the prophecies eventually, and that's what tikkun olam is about from the days of Ezekiel until the Lurianic teachings. It's all about arriving to a state, a change of consciousness, where the weeping saline waters, the deep, the tehom, can reunite, but from a place of dialogue, not of subjugation, with the supernal, sanctified, sacred, sweet waters of the temple. So through this lens, I explore the hydro mythology of creation. I call myself a hydro-feminist, creating a correspondence between the ancient Midrashic and Kabbalistic imagination, and I'm inspired, but I try to go beyond, the phenomenology of Gaston Bachelard, who wrote very beautiful books about reveries of the elements, and one of them deals with the psychoanalysis of water. But when I said I go beyond, is because ultimately he writes as a male subject, dominating nature, the feminine. There are not many reveries there that he describes in his perusal of Western literature that are actually more generative. It's a lot about sadness and death and dissolution. So a central focus of my research is, like I said, tracing the attitude within Midrashic writings, the différence that they bring toward the trauma of the weeping waters, the low waters which shed tears upon their forced separation from the upper waters. Mm-hmm. According to Jewish myth, this rupture established a gendered hierarchy, where the upper waters are always male and the lower ones are female, yearning, casting the deep as a chaotic feminine force. So I have 1 more minute? Yeah. So Sefer Yetzirah brings a very special resonance in the foundational mystical text of Cosmogony, the Book of Creation. In its reverie of the elements, it uniquely terms the elements as emot, mothers, unlike patriarchal fathers. These emot represent the matrix of primary matter where water acts as a generative womb. And in the second round, I'll say more about Ezekiel.
Everybody said how they got to this research, so me too, I'm kind of exploring my life. I live in one of the most secular kibbutzes in Israel, and me myself, I'm not secular anymore, as you can see. So I explore two contemporary models of Jewish social spatial claimings, which seemingly had nothing in common. It's the halachic Eruv and the kibbutz. So the Eruv, as much of you know, is a religious practice of demarcating territory by means of strings and poles. It is a symbolic demarcation which privatizes the public sphere in order for observant Jews to carry around objects and manage their daily lives on the Shabbat, which is otherwise prohibited outside of the private sphere. And the kibbutz is socialist agricultural settlement which stretches a strong community life and shared common property. And it's defined by very tangible borders, mainly fences and gates, and which are mostly located in the peripheral and rural areas of Israel. So I claim that these two practices, they have much more in common than it seems. They both of them redefine the distinction between the public and the private spheres. They do it through two main axes, the space and the territory. Although they differ in many ways of religiosity and modes of governance, the kibbutz is a much more formally governed entity than the Eruv. They both are public claimings of the public sphere, and as such they raise issues of exclusion and inclusion, outsiders, insiders, and they demonstrate the tragedy of the commons. What happens when the secular kibbutz meets the religious Eruv? It is nowadays a size of very strong controversy, shaded by the cultural rift between religion and secularism in Israel, which is very, very emotional and relevant. So the seculars, neighboring of the Eruvs, claim that it is religious enforcement of the public shared secular space, and secular kibbutz by themselves are sites of controversies because they are argued to privatize shared resources, which otherwise are supposed to be serve the wider public, which is unfortunate enough to be outside the kibbutz gates. So I think that watching this rift through the frame of social and environmental sustainability, it offers us the opportunity to see connections rather than disputes, and to construct shared meanings for different populations.
Sure. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm told we have 20 minutes left. I want to share with you what Yehudah has been working on this year. Also, I neglected to mention that he also, and might be interested in this audience, Yehudah a few years ago published a magnificent translation of the introduction to Rav Kook's treatise on the sabbatical year, Shabbat Ha'aretz. Just a magnificent translation. This year I've been working on a project to develop a Jewish theology of and ethics of climate change based on reading of stories and sugyot in Talmud tractate Ta'anit, right? How does a community respond to a catastrophic climate situation? I take seriously Levinas's contention that the Babylonian Talmud is, among other things, a preeminent work of Jewish thought, right? What the central subject of Ta'anit is what happens when the climate changes alarmingly. How do we understand this? How do we respond as individuals, as a community? I've used some, by the way, a few years ago, you shared some of his materials with me, and I used them in class, and they're fantastic. And he's deploying insights and hermeneutic tools developed by not only Levinas, but also Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik and Rav Shagar. And he adds, I came to this project from 20 years of engagement with the problem of climate change through work in clean tech startups and solar energy project development. From this experience, I understood the Jewish tradition has unique insights to offer about climate change that are not identical with conventional wisdom. And I came to realize that technologists and innovators in Israel have a unique and specific contribution to make, which emerges from a sustained struggle with resource scarcity in this place, not just over the past 78 years, but stretching back over many, many centuries. And an exciting part of the Maayan Fellowship has been meeting other scholars, developing original Jewish thought that responds to and grows out of particular realities of 21st century in Israel. As he also adds, to be sure, there are large differences between the situations that the Mishnah and the Talmud were responding to a millennium and a half or more ago, and the reality of anthropogenic climate change today, but I'm discovering deep structural similarities in the array of human responses to climactic crises then and now. And as we move towards the second part, I'd like to talk about things that we have learned from over the course of the year, and also from working together. If I could just open, this is a story that my colleagues have heard me tell. I was in a meeting. I was at my university. You know, from the tone and the change in my tone of voice, you can hear like how I feel about academia these days. On a committee of like one of the programs in my university that's humanities oriented, and of course we're in grief all the time. And we were talking about things that we can do, and I mentioned, well, you know, a few years ago I started working with the environmental studies people in the university, and they were actually remarkably welcoming and hospitable and glad to work with me and stuff. And a colleague who was even more tired than I was says, oh, you know, relevance isn't going to save us in the humanities. So I said to her, it's not a matter of being relevant. Years ago, decades ago, I was working a bit in environmental and ecological things, et cetera, in the policy world, and then I left it for a bunch of reasons. And for many years, I was in human rights and those sorts of questions, and religious nationalism and all of this. And a few years ago, I began to realize that I couldn't go on working on human rights if I didn't understand something about conceptions of nature and the roles of resource development, and what does it mean to be a human being in a natural world if I'm claiming natural rights. I can't talk about nationalism without understanding, without being in some sort of deep conversation with fundamental questions about the meaning of land and how it relates to economics. And this leads me to what a big thing that I've learned in my time at Maayan. And that's, I knew that I was in recent years I became very, very interested in sustainability because I saw on how it was connected to things that I was already working on. And in the course of the year here, I've been struck by the things onto which sustainability opens up, at least for me, right? Things that I hadn't been thinking about, like aspects of sociology or mythology or the phenomenology and philosophy that Miriam and Hanoch have been heroically trying to drag me into. Success, and Avner and I have had conversations, for instance, about, coming from the perspective of secular theology, and we've talked to Jeremy about this as well. Bialik famously said that we need a new halacha that isn't related to the Shulchan Aruch. And at some point we were talking about this, and I said, oh, maybe sustainability is the thing we were looking for. Mm-hmm. To create some normative, to create some normative binding system outside of traditional religious frameworks, but that has that strong sense of normativity something that we could, that this is like, so it's not just a way of like finding neat halachic sources about this or that aspect of resource conservation, but the ways in which this opens up new ways of thinking, and not to mention B, who's like opening up new planets, literally, no, but just, I mean, challenging all of us to think about our ethical ideas in planetary terms and in interplanetary terms, and what could that possibly mean? So I just find that the experience has just been opening things up to me, but also trying to do so in a disciplined way that I don't pretend to know what my colleagues know about their respective fields. And there's something also about that very humbling experience that's been, like, to me, very beautiful here. And, you know, it's like, Kilayim karim al nefesh ha'efa. But if we could just start, if you all mind, if we could start again from Jeremy.
Same order?
Well, I suppose, unless, you know, or respond to one other thing, what this year has been for you, and the experience of working together.
Okay, so briefly, so the first thing in trying to, in thinking back to this year and things that have happened, so one of the first surprises that I had when we had the first two sessions, which the bulk of which were focused on wading through a text of Heidegger's, I was surprised to realize that you could not only learn from, but also say something about Martin Heidegger beyond whether and to what extent he was or was not a Nazi. And so, so the two things that I wanted to mention, one was, it took me a while to realize that in joining Machon Maayan, I was now part of some body that is embedded in Machshevet Yisrael, and the idea of Jewish thought and Jewish philosophy. And I was consoled by the fact that, except for perhaps Avner, none of the rest of us have really an academic training in Jewish philosophy. And so that was interesting to bring, as you say, these different perspectives, and then read texts by, it wasn't just Jewish philosophy, but we read some Hans Jonas and Hannah Arendt, and Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, but also Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Soloveitchik and Aleph Dali Gordon. So if I said that in my journey here, I sort of was leaving the world of specifically Jewish thought or Jewish in nature, I was surprised to see the renewed relevance of these things in talking about what we're all doing together. For me, it was very refreshing to be talking about these issues with people with training and perspectives that I haven't really ever responded to. The world of Jewish environmentalism is fairly circumscribed, and we all know each other. And so here are some new people and new ideas and new thought. And it was very interesting in preparing for this talk today. We were thinking of different ways of possibly presenting, and one of the ideas that we went through was, well, why don't each of us choose a word, like a key word, that we relate to, and we'll connect to that and somehow develop a vocabulary. And with the words that were suggested, justice and responsibility and community and dialogue, relationship, etc., I realized were not only indeed some of the things that have informed our discussions over the year, but also were amazing lenses through which to look at our life and our society in general, and I think inform all of our work.
So maybe I'll just continue from where you stopped. First of all, there was many ideas, but one word that you didn't mention was tikkun.
Nachon.
Tikkun olam.
Suggested by B. In that talk, and Rachel was saying a few words about tikkun earlier. And one thing that I found great about this talk is a joke that I heard from Yehudah about tikkun. Probably maybe you heard it before. The joke goes as follows: how do you say tikkun olam in Hebrew? Tikkun olam is not the word in Hebrew; it's in English. And I after the meeting, after I heard the joke from Yehudah, I was thinking about it again, and I think it's a very, very serious joke. And the fact that in Israel, tradition, Judaism, religion is a tool for nationalistic aspirations, and a tool for kibush, occupation, and a tool for colonial project, is making the idea, even the idea that religion is part of the question of how do we make this world better, not something that it is something that really is out of the question for Israeli society today, and that's amazing. And that's something that needs to be totally changed. And thank you for that.
Okay, I'll take it from there. No, so
that would be helpful.
So my word was for myself was ingenuity, and I guess in learning from this group that's a very complex word. So coming from science, I think about native plants, native trees. We got to protect the animals, the plants. They're native, and all the non-native. We got to protect them because there's invasive species and all that. And then suddenly it got a completely whole turn from the beginning with Heidegger and like, oh, what's being indigenous? So I'll give an example of when I came to this. I wrote part of my proposal was about the Babylon Tower of as a mirror to what humans are trying to do now. When the people of Babel wanted to build a tower, they wanted to reach God, and the idea was God didn't really like the idea that they're going up there, so he told everybody, "You're bad, stop it," and he gave them different languages, and that was really bad. I'm saying, okay, maybe God is trying to tell us, don't go to the moon, don't go to Mars, don't do this, it's bad. And then going deeper into that actual story, while I was in this group, I'm thinking, okay, what actually happened there? Going deeper into it, they were nameless. They were people without a name. And they had one ambition, working together. But they didn't have a name, they didn't have an identity, they didn't have something that really cared about each individual person in building the tower. They were more obsessed with building the tower. They were more obsessed with having each brick in the right time. And if a brick fell, because it took them a whole year to get to the top, they were really sad. But if a person fell to his death, they didn't really care because he was nameless. He was just another person working. And that's actually what he was angry about. The fact that as individuals, when we're building something together, we should be, as people together, working together. And one of the punishments that he gave them is having different languages. So in the beginning, I thought this is really bad. Different languages are all spreading in different directions. And then Miriam told me, actually, there's something beautiful. Tons of knowledge came out of that. People went in different directions. People had different thoughts. People had different ideas. It wasn't just, something bad. It was also something, incredible that people suddenly got, their ideas, their thoughts, their own ways of thinking. And that brought knowledge, many, many different types of knowledge. And, that's kind of what I don't have some big idea, but the idea that, ingenuity could be something amazing and we need to protect, and there's stuff that are good, that they have their place, but in the same time, it's dangerous to not see the differences and having, individuals having their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own thing is also part of it. So when I think about going to Mars, going to the moon, going to other planets, we should really think about why we're doing this, why each individual has their own story, their own ideas, their own thought. And, when kind of Neil Armstrong went and he said, one small step for man, one giant step for, sorry, I'm misquoting it because I'm a bit nervous, but for
small
mankind.
Step for a man.
Yeah, no, he didn't say a man, he said man, and that was confusing. So the idea that it's individuals, individual people are doing this, and we're all working together, but we're individuals, and I think that's really important, and that's kind of what I learned in this group.
Yeah.
So, it was mainly, for me, it was a very empowering experience. Coming from a strong background in Jewish philosophy and medieval Kabbalah, two academic fields that are very heavily compartmentalized, and here in Israel, strictly philological. I was surprised that all of a sudden I find myself in a functioning think tank of new ideas, of a new theology, of creating Jewish thought, and not just critical editions of manuscripts. And,
Not recording.
and I discovered also that what I'm trying to reveal about matter on the symbolic and ontological plane actually matters in a broader context, thanks to your reflections and feedback. And my word is dialogue. So on the one hand, I felt like on a personal level as a scholar, I felt for the first time truly seen and understood, and also non-apologetic, because when in Jewish philosophy conferences, when I'm asked, what are you doing? Well, I'm researching the phenomenology of water. They look at me, like an extraterrestrial. And so there was that feeling of being really of belonging, and also the dialogue with you helped me understand and strengthen me in my path to see that the active conversation that I have with my fellows, that my research subject actually has something to offer, that Kabbalah actually has something very unique to offer to the development of a Jewish thought that engages with nature. And through our joint work, through our dialogue, it became clear to me that the mystical symbol, be it water or earth, it's not just mere textualization of nature, but can offer an ontological engagement with the world itself.
Oh.
So that's my
Before Shira speaks, I just have to say, it's amazing how much effort we have to go through to have the faith that the things that really interest us are interesting. And even if they don't automatically feed into someone else's pre-packaged ideological, methodological framework. So that's, wow. Shira,
Okay, so I'll come back to Jeremy because I was completely, I underwent two processes during this group's gathering. First of all, I never met philosophy. I come from what my head of my faculty calls the Madai HaChevre, which is very, I don't, and I remember, I never read Heidegger. I just heard about such a figure, but I never read text. And to reveal a secret, once in the beginning of the year, I asked Gemini, what's the difference? Explain me between ontology and phenomenology. And it was so strange, so out of my comfort zone. And then I learned through the meetings, I understood that I just internalized the language in some form, and and I learned to frame my ideas within philosophical ideas. One good example is I met Hannah Arendt theory, which teach me about perceiving the polis as a public space of freedom and of a geopolitical doing. And now me and Avner and Bea are working on a shared paper dealing with the polis. The other change was the scaling, because I deal with the local, the micro, the communities within their immediate environment, and then we basically flew with Beck to the outer space. So we have experienced the whole scale from of environments, which is really, whether you look at it from the outer space to the local community, you can identify processes of human environment encountering, which are this Midat Rochak, this enlargement is amazing in my opinion. So thank you for Miriam and Hanoch and for the group.
So what? Right. Yeah. Before I'd like to open it up, I just have to make one comment. You know, in the sustainability, environmental, et cetera, thing, we talk about like a lot of very depressing things, and I think that like listening to him, you're just like, no, how much this is also fun. It's just tremendously. So we'd love to hear comments, questions from you all. Steve, or anyone.
You can just say your name before.
Right, and then
Stephen Kepnes from United States, from Colgate University, and from now Cape Cod. Cape Cod is an incredible part of the world, kind of like very, very special, very much fallible and endangered. As I say, in 100 years, we might not have Cape Cod because the waters will just envelop us. Waters. Two things, two thoughts. First of all, thank you so much. It's really inspiring. I'm thinking of, there were two words that I have. First is lament in pain, and it's bubbling under the surface, but I think, as Yehudah just said, this has been so hopeful. So, I mean, you've really taken the, I think, awareness and sensitivity deeply to pain, the brokenness of our world, of our dear nation Israel, and coming from America, also we're deeply broken in our democracy, but yet you've all found a way to, in your ways, even articulating it, but also there's something hopeful. I don't know exactly, even in your thing, that, you know, we could get a microbe and the whole thing is over. But
that's a comforting thought.
Well, I don't know. There's something in the way she said it that, I don't know. Well, at least she's identified the problem. The other thing is theology. I'm a theologian, and I do think we need, there, underneath this pain, above, is the consciousness of the reality of justice, the importance of ethics. For all of you, you all somehow share in your diversity a deep sensitivity to what is right, to what is true. You have it, each one of you. Now, for me as a philosopher theologian, you know, Plato called it the good. We call it Hashem. We call it God. Now, I know you're a secular theologian, and we also talked about Buber he was a secular theologian, and he had a notion of the eternal thou. So, if you will, and so we already have that articulated. But I still believe in the Jewish tradition, so I still believe in Hashem. And I think that we have great resources in that, even though it's been tarnished deeply. And you said that by our religion in Israel. We've got to, as Jews, as Israelis, as American Jews, the thing that unites us in another way is God. But we have, you know, so, and I'm hearing that if you want to say you're a philosopher, I would ask you, why do you call yourself a theologian of psych? Why don't you call yourself a philosopher? But that's another, maybe you and I will talk about. But anyways, thank you all for your hopefulness.
Where were you last week when we met and we needed this outlook when you gave us now? It's really...
I was trying to get here.
Thanks for being here now.
And please, and your name is?
Nargis Virani.
Oh, yes.
And part of what I wanted to say, Stephen covered already, the hope, the idea of hope and the diversity is so fascinating. What I've seen in the fellows here, I almost want to apply myself for being a fellow here. But I think that it's really important to, again, look at within your traditions, you're looking at a lot of diversity already in terms of working with cutting edge issues of our day, which is what our traditions did. I come from the Muslim tradition, and so our traditions did that. But I think what was important in your talk about the Tower of Babel, I mean, this is exactly the kind of creativity and the productivity that goes when people speak different languages, right? What Miriam was saying. And within the Quran, it is acknowledged as a strength, So it is seen as diversity in terms of not just color and ethnicities, but even languages is seen as the word in the Arabic is a mutual learning, so that you learn from each other. So I think that that was really striking for me as I was taking, like Stephen, multiple flights to come here. I think that what the question that continuously swirls in my mind that Avner, you addressed partially, is to do with the question of sustainability and the destructive forces of wars. And that is a topic which I would love to see, because that is something that has been twirling in terms of environmental degradation on all sides. And what does that mean? You know, you were talking about the fact that, you know, the dogs bark and things happen. Within that, these kind of defensive wars that go on, what is that impact on society? And for the Muslim tradition that I'm going to speak about tomorrow is the question of, the Quran talks about it as the corruptors. Fasad is the word. That those who spread corruption, now you can take that corruption amongst people or land or anything else, right? The larger idea of human beings as ethical beings. And somehow I don't see within traditions that they could be contradictory, mutually sort of contradictory in terms of belief in God and taking personal responsibility for ethical. So I'm with Stephen on that there is a tradition belief that also gives the creative agency for the human person, and part, or very foundational part of that creative agency is ethics. It's the ethical dimension that has to be personally, so perhaps we can have longer discussion, but thank you so much for opening new worlds and vistas for many of us. Thank you.
For one more.
Colin? Yeah, my name is Raphael, and I'm from the Department of Jewish Philosophy, and I've been studying here about 6 years. But today, I think they give me something new, because when I see sustainability, and then I always think, okay, only environment, about the environment. But now today I see that, okay, it's not only environment, it's about the future. It's not only about the physical things, it's about the sustainability of the whole civilization, the whole thing. For example, in the Eastern Asia, now the whole population has been shrinking. So we have all the technology, all the constructions going on, but the population is shrinking. The people they don't want to get married. And then, so it's about the whole culture, civilization, not only just physical things,
And it's also
environment.
time.
And also from as a student of the Jewish philosophy, that's wonderful. We can bring out what we learned. It's not just looking at and the books, things. We do something beautiful. It's about the future. It's not just a side project. Okay, it's in front of us. Let's go forward for this. So thank you for the inspiration.
Oh, I just wanted to say something.
Professor
Please,
Laurie.
Professor Laurie Zola.
Just to say something practical and cheerful about space, which is that I serve on NASA's National Ethics Committee. And I used to serve on the PPAC, which is the Planetary Protection Advisory Committee. And so NASA is very interested in exactly those questions and has been working for decades, thinking about those little microbes and thinking about how to protect the planet, their planets, and our planet from one another's invasion. So it is something, it is actually happening in the world. Worry not, it's not just philosophical discourse, it's an actual practical discourse with space law and people with many different countries who come together to think about this very seriously and quietly. And it has yet not been cut by the Trump administration. I'm glad to say our next meeting is in August.
Right. So that's good. Great. So I think our time is done, but thank you all. Thank you for listening to us so respectively and we're all in this together.
Final word. I feel very proud. It's amazing to hear and to see how far you've all come, and it's a real honour. And in 3 weeks' time, I'll say 4 weeks' time to keep us a little bit calm. We're all going to be travelling to Rome together to present at the European Academy of Religion. So you're welcome to come and join us there and hear longer and more developed papers from each of our scholars. Conference speakers are invited to lunch at Rosemary at 1:10. And for everybody else, we're going to meet back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you.